Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to study Henry Fielding's biography, his works, and his career. So let us begin. Henry Fielding was born on 22nd April 1707 and died on October 8, 1754. He was an English writer and magistrate known for the use of humor and satire in his works. His 1749 comic novel, The History of Tom Jones, a Foundling, was a seminal work in the genre. Along with Samuel Richardson, Fielding is seen as the founder of the traditional English novel. Fielding also played an important role in the history of law enforcement in the United Kingdom, using his authority as a magistrate to found the Bow Street Runners, London's first professional police force. Henry Fielding was, as I have already told you, born on 22nd April 1707 at Sarpham Park, the seat of his mother's family in Sarpham, Somerset. He was the son of Lieutenant General Edmund Fielding and Sarah Gold, daughter of Sir Henry Gold, a son of the Earl of Denbigh. His father was a nephew of William Fielding, 3rd Earl of Denbigh. Fielding was educated at Eton College, began a lifelong friendship with William Pitt the elder. His mother died when he was 11. A suit for custody was brought by her grandmother against his charming but irresponsible father, Lieutenant General Edmund Fielding. The settlement placed Henry in his grandmother's care, but she continued to see his father in London. In 1725, Henry tried to abduct his cousin Sarah Andrews, with whom he was infatuated, while she was on her way to church. He fled to avoid prosecution. In 1728, Fielding traveled to Leiden to study classics and law at the university. However, penury forced him back to London, where he began writing for the theatre. Some of his works savagely criticized the government of Prime Minister Sir Robert Walpole. According to George R. Levine, Henry Fielding, in his first writings, used two forms of rhetorical poses that were popular during the 18th century. Henry Fielding would construct the non-ironic pseudonyms such as Addison and Steele used in The Spectator, and the ironic mask or persona such as Swift used in his A Modest Proposal. The Theatrical Licensing Act of 1737 is said to be a direct response to his activities in writing for the theatre. Although the play that triggered the act was the unproduced, anonymously authored The Golden Rump, Fielding's dramatic satires had set the tone. Once it was passed, political satire on stage became all but impossible. After the Theatrical Licensing Act, satires were almost impossible to put on the stage. Fielding retired from the theatre and resumed his legal career to support his wife Charlotte Craddock and two children by becoming a barrister, joining the Middle Temple in 1737 and being called to the bar there in 1740. Fielding's lack of financial acumen meant the family often endured periods of poverty, but they were helped by Ralph Allen, a wealthy benefactor on whom Squire Allworthy in Tom Jones would be based. Allen went on to provide for the education and support of Fielding's children after the writer's death. Henry Fielding, about 1743, acting from Jonathan Wild. Fielding never stopped writing political satires and satires on current arts and letters. The Tragedy of Tragedies, for which Hogarth designed the frontispiece, was, for example, quite successful as a printed play. Based on his earlier Tom Thumb, this was another of Fielding's irregular plays published under the name of H. Scriblerus Secundus, a pseudonym intended to link him ideally with the Scribblers Club, of literary satirists founded by Jonathan Swift, Alexander Pope, and John Gay. He also contributed several works to journals. From 1734 to 1739, Fielding wrote anonymously for the leading Tory periodical, The Craftsman, against the Prime Minister Sir Robert Walpole. His patron was the opposition Whig MP George Littleton, a boyhood friend from Eton to whom he later dedicated Tom Jones. Littleton followed his leader, Lord Cobham, in forming a Whig opposition to Walpole's government called the Cobhamites, which included another of Fielding's Eton friends, William Pitt. In The Craftsman, Fielding voiced an opposition attack on bribery and corruption in British politics. Despite writing for the opposition to Walpole, which included Tories as well as Whigs, Fielding was unshakably a Whig and often praised Whig heroes such as the Duke of Marlborough and Gilbert Burnet. Fielding dedicated his play Don Quixote in England to the opposition Whig leader Lord Chesterfield. It appeared on 17 April 1734, the same day writs were issued for general election. He dedicated his 1735 play The Universal Gallant to Charles Spencer, 3rd Duke of Marlborough, a political follower of Chesterfield. The other prominent opposition paper, Common Sense, founded by Chesterfield and Littleton, was named after a character in Fielding's Pasquin. 1736. Fielding wrote at least two articles for it in 1737 and 1738. Fielding continued to air political views in satirical articles and newspapers in the late 1730s and early 1740s. He was the main writer and editor from 1739 to 1740 for the satirical paper The Champion, which was sharply critical of Walpole's government and of pro-government literary and political writers. He sought to evade libel charges by making its political attacks so funny or embarrassing to the victim that a publicized court case would seem even worse. He later became chief writer for the Whig government of Henry Pelham. Fielding took to novel writing in 1741, angered by Samuel Richardson's success with Pamela. His first success was an anonymous parody of that novel called Samela. This follows the model of Tory satirists of the previous generation, notably Swift and Gay. John Gay. Fielding followed this with Joseph Andrews, 1742, an original work supposedly dealing with Pamela's brother Joseph. His purpose, however, was more than parody, for as stated in the preface, he intended a kind of writing which I do not remember to have seen hitherto attempted in our language. In what Fielding called a comic epic poem in prose, he blended two classical traditions, that of the epic, which had been poetic, that of the drama, but emphasizing the comic rather than the tragic. Another distinction of Joseph Andrews and the novels to come was use of everyday reality of characters and action as opposed to the fables of the past. While begun as a parody, it developed into an accomplished novel in its own right and is seen as Fielding's debut as a serious novelist. In 1743, Fielding published a novel in the Miscellanies, Volume 3, which was the first volume of the Miscellanies, The Life and Death of Jonathan Wild the Great, which is sometimes counted as his first, as he almost certainly began it before he wrote Samela and Joseph Andrews. It is a satire on Walpole's, equating him and Jonathan Wild, the gang leader and highwayman. He implicitly compares the Whig party in Parliament with a gang of thieves run by Walpole, whose constant desire to be a great man, a common epithet with Walpole, ought to culminate in the antithesis of greatness, hanging. Henry Fielding wrote for wrote the text for the roast beef of Old England, whose tune is used by both the Royal Navy and the United States Marine Corps in 1731. Richard Leverage later arranged it. This version is performed by the United States Navy Band. Fielding's Anonymous, the female husband, 1746, fictionalized a case in which a female transvestite was tried for duping another woman into marriage. This was one of the several small pamphlets costing sixpence, though a minor piece. In his life's work, it reflects his preoccupation with fraud, scamming, and masks. His greatest work is The History of Tom Jones, a Foundling, 1749, a meticulous comic novel with elements of picaresque and the Bildungsroman telling a convoluted tale of how a foundling came into a fortune. The novel tells of Tom's alienation from his foster father Squire Allworthy and his sweetheart Sophia Weston, and his reconciliation with them after lively and dangerous adventures on the road and in London. It triumphs as a presentation of English life and character in the mid 18th century. Every social type is represented, and through them, every shade of moral behavior is presented also. Fielding's varied style tempers the basic seriousness of the novel, and his authorial comment before each chapter adds a dimension to a conventional, straightforward narrative. Fielding's younger sister, Sarah Fielding, also became a successful writer. Sarah Fielding's novel The Governess or The Little Female Academy, 1749, is thought to be the first in English aimed expressly at children. Fielding married Charlotte Craddock in 1734 at the Church of St. Mary in Chalcombe, Somerset. She died in 1744, and he later modelled the heroines of Tom Jones and Amelia on her. Means Fielding modelled her heroines of Tom Jones and Amelia on her. Her means Charlotte Craddock, his wife. Fielding and Sarah had 5 children. Their only daughter Henrietta died at the age of 23, having already been in deep decline when she married a military engineer, James Gabriel Montresor, some months before. 3 years after Charlotte's death, Fielding disregarded public opinion by marrying her former maid, Mary Daniel, who was pregnant. Mary bore 5 children, 3 daughters who died young, and 2 sons, William and Alan. Despite the scandal, Fielding's consistently Jacobitism and support for the Church of England led to his appointment a year later as a Westminster Chief Magistrate, while his literary career went from strength to strength. Most of his work concerned London's criminal population of thieves, informers, gamblers, and prostitutes. Though living in a corrupt and careless society, he became noted for impartial judgments, incorruptibility, and compassion for those whom social inequities led into crime. The income from his office, the dirtiest money upon earth, dwindled as he refused to take money from the very poor. Joined by his younger half brother John, he helped found what some call London's first police force, the Bow Street Runners, in 1749. According to the historian G.M. Trelawney, the Fieldings were two of the best magistrates in the 18th century London who did much to enhance judicial reform and improve prison conditions. Fielding's influential pamphlets and inquiries included a proposal for abolishing public hangings. This did not, however, imply opposition to capital punishment as such, as is evident, for example, in his presiding in 1751 over the trial of the notorious criminal James Field, finding him guilty in a robbery and sentencing him to hang. John Fielding, despite being blind by then, succeeded his older brother as chief magistrate, becoming known as the Blind Beak of Bow Street for his ability to recognize criminals by their voices alone. In January 1752, Fielding started a fortnightly The Covent Garden Journal, published under the pseudonym Sir Alexander Dawkinson, Kent, censor of Great Britain until November of that year. Here, Fielding challenged the armies of Grub Street, the periodical writers of the day, in a conflict that became a paper war of 1752-1753. Fielding then published examples of interposition of providence in the detection and punishment of murder. 1752 advertised rejecting deistic and materialistic visions of the world in favor of belief in God's presence and divine judgment, arguing that murder rate was rising due to neglect of Christian religion. In 1753, Fielding wrote proposal for making an effectual provision for poor. Fielding's humanitarian commitment to justice in the 1750s, for instance, in support of Elizabeth Canning, coincided with rapid deterioration in his health. Gout, asthma, cirrhosis of liver left him on crutches, and with other afflictions sent him to Portugal in 1754 to seek a cure, only to die 2 months later in Lisbon, reportedly in pain and mental distress. His tomb there in a British cemetery, the graveyard of St. George's Church, Lisbon. Now the works of Henry Fielding. Samela, it is a novella, 1741. History of the adventures of Joseph Andrews and his friends, Mr. Abraham Adams, 1742. The life and death of Jonathan Wild the Great, written in 1743. Ironic treatment of Jonathan Wild, a notorious underworld figure of the time, published as Volume 3 of Miscellanies. Female husband, or the surprising history of Mrs. Mary alias Mr. George Hamilton, who was convicted of having married a young woman of wealth and lived with her as her husband. Taken from her own mouth since her confinement, pamphlet fictionalized, report 1746. The History of Tom Jones, a Foundling, 1749. A Journey from this World to the Next, 1749. Amelia, 1751. Partial list of poems written by Fielding. The Masquerade, Fielding's first publication, part of Juvenal's sixth satire, modernized in burlesque verse plays. Modernized burlesque. Now verse plays: Love in Several Masks, 1728. Rape upon Rape, or the Justice Caught in His Own Trap, 1730. Also known as the Coffee House Politician, played in Rapid Tom Thumb the Great. Tom Thumb the Great, a burlesque tragedy, 1730. The Temple View, 1730. The Author's Force and the Pleasures of the Town, 1730. The Letter Writers, or A New Way to Keep a Wife at Home, a farce. The Tragedy of Tragedies, or The Life and Death of Tom Thumb the Great. It is a revision of Tom Thumb the Great, written in 1731. The Coffee House Politician, or Justice Caught in His Own Trap, a comedy, 1730-31. A reworking of Rape upon Rape. In 1730, another act was added to the play titled The Battle of the Poets. Author unknown. Who wrote this? It is unknown. The Old Debauchees, originally titled The Despairing Debauchees, later revived as the Bicauchees or Jesuit Court in 1732. The Covent Garden Tragedy originally appeared in rep with the Old Debauchees, but only played one night. Eventually revived in rep with Don Quixote in England. The Mock Doctor, or The Dumb Lady Cured, 1732. The Wells Opera, originally a companion piece to The Tragedy of Tragedies. The Grub Street, 1731. Fielding's only closet drama. The Modern Husband, 1732. The Lottery, played in rep with Joseph Addison's Cato, a ballad opera with music from Mr. Zero. The Intriguing Chambermaid, an old man taught wisdom, or The Virgin Unmasked, Don Quixote in England. It is a ballad opera. The Miser, The Universal Gallant, or The Different Husbands, Pasquin, Eurydice, a farce, Eurydice hissed or a word to the wise. The historical register for the year 1736-37. Miss Lucy in town, the tumble down Dick or Phaeton in Suits. It is a ballad opera. The Wedding Day, it is a comedy. The Fathers, published posthumously with Oliver Goldsmith, The Good Natured Man. So, friends, that was all about Henry Fielding, his career as a novelist and the magistrate. So, that is all about his biography. We will meet in the next lecture. Thank you.